One of the most famous of all North Carolina legends goes back over 200 years, and it's in Bear Creek, North Carolina in Chatham County. It's down a quiet tree-lined road that's pretty spooky looking at night, and I live in a small town in North Carolina, and I know how dark and spooky country roads can be. It's called the Devil's Tramping Ground, and it's a 40 feet in diameter, almost perfect circle where nothing but a few tiny blades of grass will grow inside. I've read that the circle has actually gotten smaller and it's more like 20 feet in diameter now. Scotch-Irish settlers originally named the spot, and perfect circles are rarely seen in nature, and they're also connected to supernatural events. It's a circle that surrounds a slightly less scorched inner circle. One geometrically perfect circle in the middle of a forest is uncommon, but two occurring naturally is extremely rare. For example, a circle of mushrooms is often called a fairy ring. According to the Encyclopedia of North Carolina, normal vegetation surrounds the circle, but only a wiry grass grows inside it, and no plant life of any kind can be found on the path itself. Locals have been unsuccessful in trying to transplant the wiry grass to other soils. It used to be mainly a local legend, but interest increased drastically after author John Hardin published his book on the topic. Local residents would give directions to the area hundreds of times, and because of this, directional markers were put up. The most common lore says that the devil walks in the circle at night, and this is the cause of no plant life being able to grow there. And they said that he angrily brushes aside anything left in his path, and because of his strength, he can easily toss aside even the heaviest of objects. John Hardin of Greensboro said this about the Devil's Tramping Ground. Chatham natives say that the devil goes there to walk in circles as he thinks up new means of causing trouble for humanity. There, sometimes during the dark of night, the majesty of the underworld of evil is silently tramping around that bare circle, thinking, plotting, and planning against good in behalf of wrong. And some people have seen some really strange things there. They say that birds will not nest there in the trees close to the circle. According to some local residents, dogs refuse to cross the circle's path, and many of them will bark, growl, and bare their teeth in the direction of the circle. There's a story about a group of Boy Scouts that spent the night outside of the circle, and when they woke up, they had mysteriously traveled a few miles away. Some other campers tried to stay up all night in a tent and later reported that a soft, soothing voice lulled them to sleep, and they also woke up a few miles away. People have reported seeing shadow-like or ghostly figures in the woods just watching them. And legend has it that the circle is the devil's playground. Believers say every night that the clock strikes 12, he comes up one path and stomps around in a circle, eliminating all growth in life before going down a second path. Some believe that it was an ancient meeting place for Native American tribes who made the bear circle with their ceremonial dances. Others say that it's an ancient burial ground. Blame everything mysterious on Native Americans, right? Another story says that it's the location of a battle between two rival tribes. Supposedly, the blood of those killed soaked the ground and made it impossible for anything to be able to grow there again. And the losing tribe was said to have then fled to the Outer Banks, and they became the Croatoan tribe that's now associated with the lost colonists of Roanoke. So the entire colony of Roanoke Island disappeared from what is now North Carolina when the colony's leader, John White, returned to England for supplies. The only clue was the word Croa or possibly Croatoan that was carved into a tree. And if you watched American Horror Story Roanoke, then you know what I'm referring to. Others say that the site is the burial ground of a great Indian chief named Croatoan, and that the gods keep the spot barren as a memorial to their loyal followers. So while the legend has existed for generations, modern times have brought modern theories. So this day and age, you would expect the devil to do something more terrifying than just walk around in a circle. And this is probably why the stories have changed so much over time. There's now a UFO connection that says that the soil is barren because the circle was the site of a UFO landing and the radiation prevented any future growth. Some say that the horses that were used in the operations of an old molasses mill created the spot with their constant circular treading. However, comparisons to the paths formed at similar mills do not support this theory. Obviously, no one has a clue, but it is fun to speculate, and none of the theories have been documented as ever happening. If you visit Devil's Tramping Ground today, you'll see this sign posted. The reason behind it is pretty hippie-ish, but here you go, and maybe you can make some sense of this. It says this site is the famous energy vortex historically called the Devil's Tramping Ground, a privately owned parkland of the Robert Dowd family. Visitors to the park are asked to respect the park, its plants, trees, birds, and other animals living here, and do not cut trees or hunt the animals. Please do not leave bottles, cans, trash, or other litter because it will spoil the experience for other visitors. And please do not set fires or conduct inappropriate activities here. A Magdalene crystal column of energy is anchored on this site, and this very high vibrating energy helps to balance masculine and feminine energies, strengthens harmony, and expands human consciousness. And I'll include a link that will explain what a Magdalene crystal column is. So what do the scientists say? Different scientists say different things. One study was conducted by the North Carolina Department of Agriculture, and samples of dirt were taken from the spot that were proved sterile due to an extremely high salt content. They say that remains of natural salt licks were also found in the area. Another study was done a second time by North Carolina soil scientist Richard Hayes, and he's been in this field for over 30 years. He first tested the soil a decade ago with a scientific hypothesis. The new sample results were even more of a head scratcher. Based on his findings, vegetation should be growing in the circle. What's even weirder is that the soil inside the circle is now more fertile than the tree line area outside the circle, and he explained the campfires caused that to happen. He said that hardwood ashes have made the soil's potassium level peak off the chart, but he noted the level is still not high enough to be toxic to plants. So he said that he was still stumped because there's nothing in there that prevents plants from growing. He said there's a reason other than soil fertility for why nothing's growing there. So if it's not the salt, if it's not the soil, or if it's not copper, what do you think is going on here? But I think it's more fun not to know because it keeps the mystery alive. And also, if you decide to go and you love sweets like I do, you want to make sure that you check out Southern Supreme, which is in the area. Also, if you're planning on camping out there, make sure that you ask the landowner first. So what do you think is going on here? Do you think it's anything? Do you think it's nothing? As North Carolina Ghost points out, North Carolina has a Devil's Rock, a Devil's Courthouse, 7 devils, Hill Devil Hills, Devil's Branch, Devil's Chimney, Devil's Nest, etc. And there is also a road called the Devil's Whip, and it is absolutely horrible. I hate that road. Do you see the curves on this? It's terrifying. Next, we have the Devil's Courthouse, and according to a sign at the overlook of this location, the bare rock profile is sinister in appearance and legend. Its devilish look has contributed to the many folk tales surrounding this mountain. The legend goes like this. There's a cave inside of the mountain where the devil holds court. And in Cherokee lore, this cave is the private dancing chamber and dwelling place of the slant-eyed giant Juticula.
As it was more commonly said in Cherokee, Tsutlakala.
AtlasObscura.com says that the Cherokees believed Juticula, an ancient creature, landed on the rock while jumping from one mountain to another, and the rock is a petroglyph. Petroglyphs symbolize important places, stories, or events. And there's also lingering folklore about ghost sounds being heard around the rock at night. And that's made spookier by the location of a cemetery, which is a few hundred feet away. Next, we have Devil's Head. As mentioned on the blueridgehighlander.com website, the head was created ages ago when a large slab of rock fell from above, leaving a chunk of rock stranded along the edge. And over time, softer stone eroded away, leaving behind an image of a head-like being. The Devil's Horse's hoof prints near Bath, North Carolina, are a series of small saucer-shaped depressions that have reportedly been around since the early 1800s. To many, the story is more than just a ghost story or a tale of a haunted place. Some say that it was a warning about the evils of betting on the Sabbath and drinking too much. So the story goes that there was a young man named Jesse Elliott who was a hard-living, hard-drinking, profane man who loved to race horses. He owned the fastest horse in the county, a black stallion, and they won every race that they were in. So one Sunday morning in 1802, Jesse Elliott and a few friends were racing the horses along Bath's main street. A tall stranger that was dressed in dark clothing appeared earlier that morning to challenge Jesse, and his dog growled to warn Jesse of danger, but it didn't work. So he made a bet that his horse would be Jesse's horse. So Jesse accepted the bet, went home to get his horse. And his wife was upset that he was racing on the Sabbath. And his wife, she was just fed up with his nonsense. And she yelled at him as he was leaving that she hoped that he was taken to hell that very day. So Jesse arrived at the track where the stranger was waiting with his horse, which was a midnight black stallion that was larger and more fierce than any animal that Elliott had ever seen. On top of the horse was the stranger dressed all in black with an evil fire burning in his eyes. Jesse stopped for a minute because he was actually a little bit scared, but his greed consumed him and he shouted, "Take me a winner or take me to hell." Jesse's horse was ahead while the stranger seemed to be taking his time. And as they got closer to the finish line, the stranger's horse with a great burst of speed was now right beside Jesse. So Jesse's horse dug its feet into the ground and he was thrown off and into a tree where he was killed instantly. Another version says that Jesse was winning the race, but when he reached a sharp turn in the road, his horse looked back and was spooked by what it saw. As for the stranger, it's said that he just laughed and rode back to his home in hell with Jesse's soul riding behind him on the fiery black stallion. The hoof prints that Jesse's horse made are still in the ground even through heavy rain. The minister at the local church began preaching about the hoof prints, saying that they remained immovable in the ground as an example of where a wicked life would lead. It's said that nothing will grow in those hoof prints, that no bird would eat seed placed in them, and that nothing that's put in the tracks will stay there overnight. Legend also says that the horse could have been the devil in disguise, or his mysterious rider was the descendant of fire and brimstone. Scientists have tried to explain the depressions as being caused by salt veins or vents for a subterranean water pocket, but the hundreds, possibly thousands of people who have seen the hoof prints believe that the legend is actually true. And for many years, an old decayed stump of a large pine tree was visible near the hoof prints. It was the remains of the tree that took Jesse Elliott's life.